what was it's such an important topic, and I think it's hard for people to grasp. What was the inspiration for you and Project Censored to team up on this?
Well, I've been looking into military AI for a while, um, and what I was learning was really disturbing because it wasn't being reflected in the mainstream media. There's been some reporting about, oh, we're going to have lots of satellites sending hair follicle back pictures for analyzing by machine learning and all that. But I don't think people are really aware of one, how deeply the military in Silicon Valley are embedded in trying to transform the military into an artificial intelligence run organization where they can take human beings out of the decisional loops. And two, how ridiculous that is from a technological and scientific point of view. It's not going to happen the way that they envision it happening, which we can get into and describe for any number of reasons. But it doesn't mean that they're not causing a great deal of harm along the way. I mean, they're using Gaza and the Ukraine as testing grounds for all sorts of AI-enabled weapons. They have a techno wet dream that they're going to be able to create what they call a joint all awareness demand command domain command and control system where they can create a battle space picture on screens that will unite electrons and photons streaming in from tens of thousands of sensors on the land, the sea, the air, and in outer space that will then be able to be quickly parsed by machine learning, which is the latest iteration of artificial intelligence. AI has been around for a long time, but this is its most current
Right.
and probably most powerful form. Anyway, they have this vision that they're going to be able to control the entire globe by using AIs to analyze in nanoseconds what it would take humans days to look at. And of course, since this is all happening really rapidly, the requirement for action is also rapid. My newest article is called The Stargate Fiasco, which is about data centers, and the subhead on it is World War III will take place in data centers, which is something I
Right.
talk about.
I got to that. And well, I mean, let's maybe take them in sequence. First of all, what the hell is it with Lord of the Rings and the technology of death? I mean, I was never, honestly, in college, I couldn't quite get the books. But I know a lot of people did. The movies are nice, but geez, you have Palantir, which is both cynical and lethal. You have Andoril, which is also, I guess, isn't that a Tolkien derived?
Yeah, actually, I find the movies to be horrifying and appalling, as I find the books to be horrifying and appalling. I mean, I liked them when I was a teenager, although I was fairly uninformed at the time. But consequently, Tolkien was a vicious anti-communist, and he wrote those as a diatribe against Bolshevism rising up in the East. And you have all these middle-class hobbits who are going to go save the world, right? So Peter Thiel, who famously is against democracy and against letting women vote and all sorts of, antediluvian concepts like that, when he created Palantir back in 2003 using CIA investment money through InQtel, which is the CIA investment arm in Silicon Valley, he named it after the Seeing Stone in The Lord of the Rings. But the Seeing Stone is primarily used by the Dark Lord Sauron to locate and destroy his enemies. Anduril, which is a company he created a few years later, which is more of delivers the kinetic punch, as it were. It uses the targeting information given to it by Palantir to kill people explosively. Anduril's in Tolkien talk is the flame of the sword of the flame of the West. So he's got this Tolkien talk all over it. And J.D. Vance, who is basically Thiel's apprentice, now apparently the vice president of the United States, uh, also has a investment firm called Narya Capital, which is a Tolkien word. And Most of Teal's investment vehicles are named after Tolkien things like mithril, which is a kind of white metal you'll find in that. So they have this mythology that, maybe on the from the outside it appears to be kind of cute and charming, but it's not. It's profoundly militant and reactionary, and it basically is pushing the idea that we have to have total control, like that joint all awareness domain command and control system that Palantir is definitely part of, and Anduril is definitely part of, and JD Vance is pushing. You know, it's like reminds me of that Leonard Cohen song, about I've seen the future and it is
And it's
murder, right?
and it's murder. Yeah, one of the reasons why I think a series like yours is important is it's really hard, I think, for even intelligent followers of the news to calibrate or navigate among the sort of BS component of what these guys are saying and doing and the very real threat. I mean, I remember Palmer Luckey, who's, I guess, the CEO of
Anduril.
Enderell, who's a young, very young tech bro. There was a piece about him, I think it was in Wired, where or Business Insider, where he said his AI weapons would, quote, give us the ability to swiftly win any war. And the reporter asked, well, would it be like the atomic bomb in World War II? He said, well, we don't know what it is. We have ideas. So, I mean, on the one hand, that sounds like BS. And on the other, they say, oh, well, this is going to make war impossible, is another thing he says, which we know has never been the case with any new technology that was supposed to make.
No, they sell these products based on the need to actually have wars, because if we didn't have wars, they couldn't sell them.
Right, right. And so, what I guess I'm trying to get at is, and what I'm getting so far from the series is the extent to which this stuff has taken root is causing real world harm, whether it's through AI's use of fossil fuels and natural resources, and through the invasion of privacy, the fact that this thing is really in its own way metastasized to an extent that I think a lot of people don't know. All of this, to me, is tremendously important before we even start getting into the implications for the future. What do you think?
Well, one of the reasons that I started this, and I went to Project Censored, I've been working with them off and on for years, but they're one of the only places that has the guts to actually publicize this, because there's so much hype around this. I mean, Palantir and Anduril, but also and Mark Andreessen and Musk and the rest of them, they have incredibly powerful PR machines and political lobbying machines. And your standard corporate media isn't going to go up against that at all. So when people write about it, actually, probably most of the writing about the tech that's actually worth reading, if any of it is in Substacks. The New York Times is just completely ridiculous on the whole thing and bought off. But the Substacks is probably 90% dominated by industry propaganda. And there's a few like Gary Marcus, who's actually a computer scientist and an AI expert. His Substack is consistently critical of the hype, and he knows how to unravel it technically, which is really good. But what I'm doing, which nobody else is doing that I know of, is combining some understanding of the science and technology and how fragile it is, powerful, but only within a
Yeah.
limited, context. Certainly not super intelligent, certainly not generally intelligent. Combining that with looking at the financial structures of how this is being put forward, because, if you read the SEC reports, the annual reports of Palantir, which went public in 2020, you've learned what I published in the first article in the Military AI Watch series, which is called One Ring to Rule Them All. You learn that Palantir has never paid federal taxes. It basically has run at an operating deficit for its entire life until recently, which it then filled up with venture capital. And then because it was running at a deficit, it could say that it wasn't making any profit and it didn't have to pay any taxes, even though more than half of its income was coming from the Central Intelligence Agency, Homeland Security, ICE, various militaries around the world, you know. Um, so when we look at what we can about the finances, what we see is a big Ponzi scheme kind of in reverse going on here. I mean, with Palantir, they hired Teal hired this ridiculous figure Alex Karp as the CEO. He's been there since the beginning, and he's got this like wiry hair and claims to be a student of the Marxist Jordan Habermas, right? Which he's anything but that. And
Right. He's, among other things, the whole question of the idea of the post-human comes up, right? And that kind of thing where you're really not viewing humanity in the ways we've come to understand.
well, and that's an interesting question because in some ways, I mean, this is part of my brain, right? This cell phone, this computer. I mean, we're
Right.
kind of like as Donna Haraway, the wonderful ecofeminist philosopher, has written repeatedly, we're already cyborgs.
Sure.
We've
Yeah.
been cyborgs since we picked up the first rock and used it as a hatchet, right? But it's getting a little bit out of hand as we go along. And so what we have here is we have some really cynical billionaires in Silicon Valley. Karp just wrote this horrible book about how we have to wipe out China before it wipes out us because otherwise it will get AI and we'll all be speaking Chinese. Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO, combined with Henry Kissinger a couple years ago to write a tendentious book called The Age of AI, which basically says the same thing. We have to like put everything we can into AI weapons, otherwise we're going to be wiped out by our enemies. So they create enemies.
Sure.
And this is a Democrat Republican thing. There's very little difference between how the Democrats and the Republicans have been approaching this. I mean, military AI was really pumped up by the Biden administration, and people like Jake Sullivan, his national security advisor, on the way out the door was like applauding Palantir and Anduril. So the first piece that I wrote goes into the finances of Palantir and Anduril and how that works as a basic kind of shell game, and takes a look at their technology. Now, I have to say that, a Palantir data parsing program like Gotham or Foundry, or that's some of the trade names they have, sits on top of massive amounts of data given to it by, like, say, the ICE or the Department of War. I don't call it the Department of Defense, it's Department of War. And then it finds patterns. It
Right.
is not thinking, it's not intelligent. It's simply a glorified search engine that happens to work really well because the algorithms are pretty keen. But it doesn't mean that it works in the real world because its false positive rate is huge. Palantir has been justly found guilty of over the last 2 decades of generating false positives for especially around the border because it has these programs that watch the borders through television eyes and alert the military and the police when they believe that somebody is coming across that they don't like. They they're constantly programmed with the kind of social biases that you get off the internet because
Right.
what people need to understand about machine learning, the newest iteration of AI, the chats and all that, those are trained on massive amounts of web data, mostly the Common Crawl, Wikipedia, Reddit, organizations that are collections of opinions and political bias and what I call digital garbage. So your average chat is thicker than a brick, mentally. I mean, it is trained on the absolute detritus of our culture, and it's not actually doing anything more than predicting what syllable comes next after a certain syllable has been asked.
Right. I've compared it to, and I'm sure others too, to extremely sophisticated type ahead functions that you may have when you're keying in a website. It offers suggestions for you. That's basically,
Yeah.
as you
Well,
say,
I stay
prediction.
away from that as much as possible because, Apple and the rest of them are trying to insinuate AI everywhere. And some people may think that that's convenient, but actually, the reason it's being done is because all that information, every time you use an AI, whether it's on your search engine or wherever, you're feeding back into their training data. You know, they're using you, they're not
Absolutely.
paying you.
And the other piece of it that I imagine you were driving at is that this And the best case scenario is highly flawed, and it's never in the best case scenario. It's flawed because humans are flawed, and then it's flawed because of incomplete. You mentioned Apple and others. My latest laptop has so-called Apple Intelligence, which I haven't gotten around to turning off yet. I should. It likes to summarize my texts, and my kids were kidding me about Signal and saying that maybe I got a message from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, and didn't know it. And it summarized my daughter's communications by saying, Pete Hegseth sent you a memo. Now, you know, and then again, when my daughter asked me who had been at my last birthday party, sent me another message. Pete Hegseth was at your last birthday party. Now, it's funny, but then you think about this guiding a thermonuclear missile.
Yeah. Well, that's the horror of it because this joint all awareness domain command and control system I'm talking about includes the NC3, which is the nuclear command and control system as well. These large language models famously were labeled by Emily Bender and some other critics a few years ago in a famous paper as stochastic parrots. Stochastic
Right.
parrots. And which is what they are. They're parroting back a random analysis of their training data, which includes obviously what your daughter was saying now because they scooped it up and didn't ask her for it. So you've got utter stupidity coming out of one end of it. Although I will say that for certain very narrow tasks, it can be useful.
Sure.
It can be useful in if you feed it, say, mammograms, it can come up to par with a diagnostic level of skill pretty close to a human, if that means anything. It still has to be
Although
judicially
even that has a
validated.
limited lifestyle. I read a medical paper where among radiologists, no, was it radiologists or who are the guys? I'm blanking on the word who study tumors, pathologists.
Pathologist, yeah.
They were saying that increasing reliance on AI means that the quality of the AI data, and of course, is replicated across every field, including I assume military. The data gets worse and worse the
Right.
more AI starts feeding itself
Well,
instead of you.
yeah, it feeds back into itself. You've got a tremendous problem now with AI pollution on the internet. So, as it digested the internet and started answering queries of people, it was flowed back into the internet, thereby reinforcing the biases that had come. So not only is it stupid, but it hallucinates, it confabulates constantly. And this is
Right.
I recently, in my newest piece, which is about data centers in military intelligence, I referenced some general accounting offices reports of this month, in which they're basically saying that this joint all awareness command and control system is bunk. It won't work. It can't work. And yet, why are we putting billions and billions of dollars into it? We're putting billions and billions of dollars into it because we have Silicon Valley now romping around in the corridors of the Pentagon and the White House. Now, they've always been there. It's just there more right now. So
And and
there's no
and
oversight.
and this is where we get into since we started getting into the sort of warm Ouroboros, eating its own tail
Yeah, Ouroboros.
uh, on the global scale. This is where we get into what you mentioned earlier, which is that we could see the more that the the, uh, the execution of commands is switched to these so-called intelligences in cloud servers, which, by the way, I can't imagine any security threat from a military point of view worse than that. But the more likely it becomes that, as you were saying, two combatants could be inside the same data server, or at least inside the same
Right.
data
Data
center,
center.
the same farm,
Right.
and they, in effect, this could be like a split personality inside.
Well, you've got these huge data server farms, data centers. There's about 5,000 of them or so in the world. And they're mostly owned by Oracle, Amazon Web Services, Meta, and the major social media and internet companies. Amazon Web Services is beyond evil. I mean, I have to tell you that it not only has a huge contract with the CIA to run all of its cloud, it's running a joint warfighter cloud in conjunction with Microsoft and I think Oracle. Um, right now, these are the contract starts out at $10 billion, and so what they need these server farms to run to hold these advanced NVIDIA AI chips, and those chips require tremendous amounts of electricity and tremendous
Yeah.
amount of cooling water. So there's, as you'll see from my articles, I make lots of links to studies showing the absolute degradation of the ecology and environment by these server farms. It's just amazing. It's just, whatever happened to climate change, we're not talking about it anymore. This is worsening
Right.
it exponentially, you know.
Right. And you talk about in addition to that, and that's a critical part of it, and you actually have people saying, well, these artificial intelligence systems will solve climate change.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Yeah.
Right, the magical thinking.
Like they can't solve it because the answer has not appeared on the internet anywhere, right? Except
Right,
unless,
right,
yeah, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. The answer has appeared. It's getting off of fossil fuels, you know?
right,
So maybe
right,
if you
right.
ask your chat, it'll do that. But it turns out that every time you ask your chat like a question, it just to answer, with a lasagna recipe is enough energy to heat your house for a month. I mean, it's just right now, the Meta and OpenAI are starting to ask their consumers not to be polite to their chats because it's using up too much electricity, right?
Yeah, Sam Altman recently of OpenAI said just using the word please was costing them $10 million a month or something. And I don't care what they pay. I care about the environment. But there's something else I wanted to point out. I mean, there's so many ways we could go with this, Peter. But you mentioned that Biden directed the departments of defense and energy before he left to quote lease federal sites where the private sector can build frontier AI infrastructure at speed and scale to host gigawatt scale AI centers. This was from a president who claimed climate change was a priority of his.
Right.
Uh,
Shopping
and
climate.
even more appalling, you quote Defense Scoop, a publication. Now, I used to be an IT person, as a systems designer and supervisor, and this data analysis and all that stuff, and many years ago. But so that part of me, which is mostly dormant, thank God, uh, was traumatized to read this sentence that the Pentagon, quote, operates a complex information network environment comprised of more than 15,000 unclassified and classified networked and cloud environments around the globe, managed in a federated, decentralized way by a host of different combatant command services, agencies, and field intelligence activities. If there's one thing they taught us and drummed into us, it was that complexity is disastrous. That the more nodes or links in a system, the more chances for failure. You take 15,000 multiplied by all the possible combinations and all the failure points within them. As you say, cybersecurity is an oxymoron. This is like a giant digital Rube Goldberg machine powered by nuclear weapons. It's just
Well, yeah, the thing with machine learning too, it's incredibly easy to hack and spoof. I mean, if you get a pixel, if you put like a little band-aid on a stop sign, it thinks it's an elephant, right? I mean, that's the classic case. But, to think that these things that we're not hacking other people's military AI systems, and we're not hacking ours is ridiculous. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Pentagon decided to withdraw from the 15,000 data centers in clouds that it had in service and try to concentrate it all into data centers run by mostly by Amazon Web Services, which is and Microsoft. They're the big ones. It's Microsoft Azure. They seem to have like a tremendous number of. They dominate probably most of the cloud systems in the military data centers. Now, the second article I wrote is called "The Stargate Fiasco" because people heard about Stargate, and if you read the New York Times, you think it was this wonderful investment opportunity. But if you read the Financial Times, which I do because that's where the ruling class talks about the way it really is with the money, right? Um, you see, not only is that just a bunch of hype and fluff, but it's a money-making scheme by a bunch of con men, which includes, above all, Trump and his family members, the Kushners. The SoftBank deal is supposed to be financed by, I mean, the Stargate deal is supposed to be financed by SoftBank, which is this ridiculous investment bank based in Japan that made a few billion on a good investment some years ago and has been trying to replicate that ever since by making bad investments. And so they've invested a lot in OpenAI, and OpenAI is probably going to go down. I imagine my bet is that Microsoft will just scoop it up and eat it, because Microsoft already owns a lot of it. And OpenAI's expense is vastly greater than its revenue because of the cost of the data centers. People are not paying OpenAI what it costs to actually use it. So you've got Thrive Capital, which is owned by Trump's son-in-law's brother, Josh Kushner, hugely invested in OpenAI now. You've got a lot of sovereign wealth funds like from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates putting billions of dollars into uh, Stargate and into data centers generally because those are militarist monarchies that have a vested interest in being able to access the kind of military AI programs that you have in a data center to use it against their enemies, right? So
Sure.
this whole idea of you've got one country that's using Amazon Web Services and another country that's using, say, the Oracle Cloud, but they're running in the same data centers, which are all over the world. If those two countries go to war with each other, the war actually at least digitally, will be taking place inside the same data center complex. Now, undoubtedly, humans will actually spill the blood, and that's how the war will end. Because, some of these idiots are talking about, well, maybe in a few decades, we'll be able to just say to our enemies, we have this technology and we can dominate you if we unleash it. And the proposed enemy will go, oh, you're right. I capitulate here. You can have all my resources. That's never going to happen.
That was Palmer Luckey of Anderl's argument, but
Yeah.
they said
Yeah.
that about drones, and now the Ansar Allah, the Houthis, are using drones to
Well,
paralyze.
that's the ridiculous thing about drones and all the rest of these so-called autonomous weapons is that you can jam them. They rely on being able to use the electromagnetic spectrum and the 5G cell spectrum, and they're like super easy to jam. So in the Ukraine now, you've got most of the drones trailing like these super thin spiderweb thin wires behind them because their radio signals are a million times easier to jam than it is to protect against them. The
And
whole
I've
thing
got
is
to believe
It's
there's
a Rube Goldberg type of operation for sure. You said it.
absolutely, and you also explain to me, if you would, briefly, the Danish political scientist Henrik Hulse argues that substituting human vision in decision making with this system, this meta system, or whatever you want to call it, leads to a multidimensional devisualization, a blinding, quote, algorithmic fog of war. I think he's saying, but correct me if I'm wrong, that you have all these stochastic parrots, to use that term. And Polly does not want a cracker in this case because it's not alive. But you have all these parrots sort of inter bouncing off each other, like a I don't know, like a pong table with nobody running it, and that is, he's basically saying there's no coherence anymore. It's just a chaos.
Well,
So,
Polly wants a drone, right? I mean, that his
yeah.
his essay, which is really good, it's linked to in the story, is part of a whole kind of philosophical take by a number of scholars that have been looking at this in a really profound way. Um, and I link to them also in my pieces. But the idea is that the military has always tried to weaponize visualization.
Hmm.
Uh, Back in, I think the 17th century, they used camera obscuras to the sunlight from a harbor would come into a dark room and they could make a map and then put mines in the harbor and then track where the mines were and so that's evolved, through World Wars One and Two, which were high-tech wars, into the present day, where the wet dream is to have um, a complete visualization of the battle space that you can thereby control. But as this Dutch scholar is saying, that's actually taking away the ability to see what's really there because it is too complex. It is a manufactured image that is selecting only certain aspects to be revealed, and it gives us the illusion of power.
Right.
So when you've got these soldiers in these shipping containers at Creech Air Station in Nevada who've been running these Reaper drones and Hellfire missiles, killing people in Iraq and Afghanistan for years, a lot of them would go crazy and have to leave after a few months because they're killing people at a distance, but they're killing the wrong people. Not that there's any right people to kill in those cases, you know, but they're killing a lot of women and children and so-called collateral damage because the imageries are confounding. And
Mm.
the whole point of a lot of this is not only do we not need military AI to fight these wars. I mean, this whole kind of mantra that people that support it say, yeah, we can have it if we keep humans in the loop. If we keep humans in the loop about deciding who to kill, right? Like
Well,
those
humans
guys
being
in
in the
Nevada.
loop, yeah, the humans being in the loop doesn't have a good track record when it comes to war, does it?
Well, not only that, you have to decide where's the human in the loop. They're talking about the human in the loop being there at the moment the trigger is pulled, but actually the human is in the loop or not the minute that the machine is designed, right? So
Right, right, right.
increasingly, the entire idea of human machine teaming, so-called, is to take the humans out of the loop. In fact, they're designing uh, AI devices now at the University of Maryland that can assess if its human partner is having a psychotic breakdown and needs to be removed from the kill chain, as they say, the kill chain, right?
Right, right.
You know,
That
so you've got this concentration of critics that will say, well, we got to keep the human in the loop, but they're not saying, well, why do we need these wars to start with? I mean, that's the crazy thing. We're manufacturing all these enemies. Why are we like trying to go to war with China right now? China seems to be doing its best not to have a war. I
right.
mean, it's a, state capitalist, quasi-fascist, social controlling, entity, but it actually seems to be a lot more intelligent than we are in that it's not eager to start hurling nuclear weapons around with limited nuclear warfare like Biden and Obama set into play, you know.
Right, right. And the not to step on your punchline, but the piece on the Stargate project. I mean, I love your conclusion to it. You describe it as a blip in the ongoing evolution of a blind AI watchmaker, this international internet of military things. In other words, this is just kind of occluding onto itself with ever more complexity. And then it starts an emergent system in the way that systems thinkers and computer scientists used to talk about that. They just starts to like, uh, you know, act without understanding randomly. I mean, that's how I take it. And these lethal autonomous weapons, so called, in every dimension of our existence, and then you call it a massive fractal, a complex system of self-organizing, pattern replicating weapons. In other words, just as with nuclear war and chemical warfare and God knows how many other technologies before that, instead of applying our intelligence, as you say, to figuring out why the hell we fight these stupid things called wars, we are making it not only easier, but almost easier to become accidental. We still have those nuclear weapons too.
Well, as we well know, we almost had massive total nuclear war on several occasions due to computer glitches that were miraculously
Right.
caught by humans, you know. Um, the fragility of the whole system is something that most people that are involved in making it happen understand, but they don't seem to care. And they never question, well, why don't we enter into treaty negotiations with China and Russia and whoever else we fear in the markets, because that all boils down to economics, to not only uh, limit or get rid of nuclear weapons, but to get rid of these AI military applications. And there has been some effort towards doing that, but it keeps being taken over by industry. I mean, Google and Palantir and the rest of them pretty much go into any of these international conferences and dominate it. And people like suck up to them because they're billionaires. Human beings like to suck up to billionaires for some reason, you know. Um, but it is kind of a doomsday machine, and it is, as I say, a golem. And the thing about the golem, which comes from, the Jewish tradition, is that you create this creature out of mud and clay that can do your bidding. But in order to command it, you have to put the word of God, the Shem, into the mouth of the golem. But if the Shem falls out, then the golem goes berserk and it has its own agency. And I suggest that that's exactly what's going on now. I mean, we're not waiting for the singularity. The singularity has already happened. Men have been dominated by machines for a long time, and we're giving up a lot of our own agency and ethical and moral stances because we have forgotten that there are paths to peace. We could make peace with China. We can make peace
Sure.
with Mexico, now Canada. I mean, these are easy things to do relative to going to war. But war is how the ruling classes under capitalism and imperialism break things up so they can start over again when they get to impasses. It's really scary right now in that trade wars are usually the precursors to world wars. It happened in World War One with people debate agitating over who owned what colony in Africa, and it happened in World War Two with the Japanese being locked out of the fossil fuel chains and having to go their own way. So right now the golem has gone berserk, and the insane people are in charge even more than normal.
And the missing part of that singularity you're talking about, which some people will think of as Skynet in the Terminator movies, is that its arms are economic, right? So that's the part we didn't understand. It's the billionaires telling us that's the way. It's not Arnold Schwarzenegger with a metal exoskeleton.
Right.
It's a billionaire's money are the arms and legs of the.
And they own newspapers. I mean, Bezos owns the
Right.
Washington Post, right? Which gave like glowing reviews to Karp's hideous book about AI, and it's not even worth reading anymore at all, if it ever was. It's our media is become the enemy, and so there is a lot of fake news. I mean, the Republicans very cynically take things that are actually true and then twist them to their own purposes. Like we have to have more freedom of speech, and so they get in power and they take away everybody's freedom of speech, right? I mean,
Right.
it's the same Tweedledum Tweedledee thing going on here. But I guess the main point I'm trying to get here is that people need to take a harder look at AI. So by focusing on military AI, I'm trying to show where it's at its most weak. I mean, you may think it's convenient to ask Alexa to go turn on the lights in your room, but Alexa's also watching you and feeding back all your movements and your proclivities and tastes to Amazon, which is definitely one of the nastiest corporations that has ever walked the earth.
Agreed. Unequivocally agreed. And unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there, except just imagine Amazon piloting your, B-52s and directing ICBMs, and you have a glimpse of the future these people are building for us. Is that right?
Yeah, but this time there's no refunds.
I can't get a refund from Amazon anymore anyway. I'm sorry. Oh, I don't want to buy from them anymore. And
You
at any
don't.
rate, Peter Byrne, this is a great series. Again, it can be found at projectcensored.org, military A Watch, AI Watch, excuse me, the dangerous militarization of AI and the profiteering behind it. Check it out. It's super
And
important.
watch out if you Google it. If you put a military AI watch, it'll come up. But before you get there, it'll actually try to sell you a bunch of military AI watches.
Well, that's really funny. My recommendation, go to projectcensored.org and you'll find it there, and leave the search engines aside altogether. So, Peter Byrne, thanks for writing it. Thanks for this great ongoing work. And thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
We depend on your support here at the 0 Hour, so please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.